Ava's bare feet touched the cold metal floor of her family's quarters as she tiptoed toward the window, her breath fogging the glass. Outside, the barren landscape of Colony X9 stretched endlessly in every direction, a mix of grayish sands and jagged rocks under a pale, alien sky. Beyond the colony's perimeter, the mountains rose sharply, jagged peaks that seemed to scrape the edge of space itself. Somewhere past those mountains was the place everyone talked about with fear in their voices, the Forbidden Zone. Colony X9 wasn't like Earth. It wasn't even like the other colonies Ava's parents had lived in before they settled here. There were no trees, no animals, and barely any water. Most people thought it was a dead world. Ava's mom and dad, scientists working for the Galactic Research Union, were here to study the planet's geological history, but to Ava, it felt like they were just studying rocks. Maybe if they find the right kind of rock, we can go home, Ava muttered to herself, staring at the dull horizon. She pushed her wild brown hair out of her face and turned to look at her tiny robot companion, Pip. The little spherical droid hovered silently near her shoulder, a soft blue light blinking from his center. "You ever wonder what's out there?" she asked the droid. Pip beeped once, spinning in a quick circle to show his confusion. Her parents had warned her countless times never to go beyond the colony's safety perimeter. "Stay inside the walls," they always said. "The desert is dangerous. And whatever you do, don't go near the Forbidden Zone." The scientists and engineers who worked on the colony told stories about that place, about a tribe of alien women who roamed the land, starving, waiting for any human foolish enough to wander into their territory. It was the kind of story adults told kids to scare them, Ava figured. But something about it always made her more curious than afraid. She wanted to see these alien women for herself, to know if the stories were true. Besides, how could anyone live in a place so empty? And why was no one doing anything to help them, if they were starving? Ava glanced over at the digital clock on the wall. It was early, hours before her parents would wake up. The colony was quiet, most of the inhabitants still asleep in their pods. She could feel a familiar pull, a nagging sense that she needed to explore beyond the walls. For weeks now, the thought of the Forbidden Zone had consumed her. The more she thought about it, the more she knew she had to see it for herself. "You coming, Pip?" she asked with a grin. The droid beeped twice, hesitating. Ava reached up and patted him gently on the side. "Don't worry, we'll be back before anyone notices." With that, she slipped on her jacket and boots, grabbed her backpack filled with basic supplies, and quietly opened the door. The air outside was thin and cold, with a constant wind that howled across the barren landscape. The colony's dome-shaped buildings glowed faintly in the distance as Ava moved quickly toward the edge of the settlement, Pip floating just behind her. The safety perimeter was marked by a series of tall energy pylons that emitted a shimmering field of light. Beyond it, the desert stretched out into the unknown. As Ava approached the boundary, her heart raced with excitement. There was something almost hypnotic about the shimmering barrier, as if it was both a warning and an invitation. Beyond it, the Forbidden Zone waited. Pip beeped softly, as if asking if she was sure about this. Ava nodded, her breath catching in her throat. "It's fine," she whispered. "Just a quick look. We won't go far." Without another word, she stepped through the energy field. It crackled softly around her, tingling against her skin as she passed into the zone. For a moment, everything was silent. The wind stopped, and even Pip's usual hum seemed quieter. The ground here felt different, softer, and somehow warmer, as though the land itself was alive beneath her feet. "See? Nothing to worry about," Ava said, trying to sound confident. But as she took another step forward, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. There was something strange about this place, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Pip's sensors blinked furiously, and the droid made a series of high-pitched warning sounds, circling Ava anxiously. She turned to calm him, but froze when she saw movement in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow, something barely visible in the dim light of dawn. But then the shapes became clearer, tall figures, moving slowly across the landscape. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. The stories. Could they be real? Her breath caught as the figures drew closer, and she realized that they weren't just any creatures, they were the Zarjan. There were 6 of them, towering women with long limbs and angular faces. Their skin was translucent, a pale blue that shimmered in the low light. Their eyes glowed a soft amber, and their thin, flowing garments fluttered in the wind as they walked, gaunt and ghost-like. Ava's mouth went dry as she watched them, mesmerized. "They're real," she whispered to Pip, who was now circling her protectively, his lights flashing red. The Zarjan stopped about 50 feet away, staring at her with expressions that were hard to read: curiosity, maybe, or disbelief. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Her presence was commanding, even from a distance, and her glowing eyes seemed to pierce through the space between them. Ava swallowed hard. For the first time, she felt a twinge of fear. What if the stories were true? What if these alien women really were starving, dangerous? But then the tall figure spoke, her voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the air like a distant storm. "No human has dared enter our lands in centuries," she said, her amber eyes narrowing. "Why have you come, child?" Ava's heart pounded in her ears. She didn't know what to say. What could she say? She hadn't expected to actually meet them, let alone have to explain herself. But she couldn't let her fear show. She stood a little straighter, her mind racing. I wanted to see you," Ava said, her voice small but steady. "I wanted to know why everyone's afraid of you." The alien woman raised a brow, and the other Zarjan exchanged glances. "You are either brave or foolish," the tall one said, her tone unreadable. "Do you not fear us, little human?" Ava shook her head, though her pulse quickened. "No," she said softly. "I'm not afraid." "You don't seem so bad." The tall woman steadied her for a moment, then gave a soft chuckle, though it carried a note of sadness. "You do not know what we are," she said. "What we have become." Ava took a step closer, ignoring Pip's frantic beeping. "Then tell me," she said. "Tell me what happened to you." The woman's amber eyes flickered with something Ava couldn't quite understand, maybe hope, maybe regret. "I am Trana, matriarch of the Zarjan," she said at last. "If you truly wish to know, then follow. But be warned, little human, our story is not one of hope." Without waiting for an answer, Trana turned and began to walk deeper into the forbidden zone, her people following in silence. Ava hesitated for only a second. Then, with Pip nervously trailing behind, she followed Trana into the shadows of a world forgotten by time. The air in the forbidden zone grew cooler as Ava followed the towering figure of Trana through the barren landscape. The silence between them was broken only by the soft hum of Pip hovering close to Ava's side, occasionally emitting a worried beep. Ava could feel his anxiety, but her own curiosity outweighed any fear. She wasn't entirely sure why she was following these strange, alien women into the heart of the forbidden zone, only that she needed to understand their story. The Zarjan moved with a grace that belied their emaciated forms, their thin, angular frames swaying gently with each step. The other women kept their distance, their glowing amber eyes darting between Ava and Trana, as though they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Ava sensed that they were just as curious about her as she was about them. As they approached a large stone structure nestled between craggy hills, Trana finally broke the silence. "This is what remains of our temple," she said, her voice tinged with weariness. "It was once the center of our power, our connection to the stars. Now, it is little more than a grave." The temple loomed ahead, its dark stone walls etched with strange, shimmering symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. It was clear that the structure had once been grand, tall spires, and wide steps led to an entrance flanked by statues of alien figures, now crumbling with age. But the centuries had taken their toll, and much of the temple had fallen into disrepair. Weeds and vines crawled over the stone, and sections of the walls had collapsed, exposing the inner chambers to the elements. Ava stopped in front of the entrance, her eyes widening in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Trana's expression remained solemn. "Perhaps, once. But now it is a reminder of what we have lost." She turned to face Ava, her glowing eyes locking onto the girl's. "You wanted to know why your people fear us. You wanted to know why we are starving. I will tell you. But you must understand this is not a tale of monsters. It is a tale of desperation." Ava nodded, feeling a chill creep up her spine. She followed Trana into the temple, Pip buzzing nervously behind her. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and dust. The ceiling arched high above them, supported by cracked pillars that seemed ready to collapse at any moment. Strange, glowing crystals lined the walls, casting an eerie light over the space. The Zarjan gathered around, standing in the shadows as Trana led Ava to the center of the room, where a large, circular stone platform stood. "This," Trana said, gesturing to the platform, "is where it began. The Star Heart, the source of our power and our downfall." Ava stepped closer, her gaze drawn to the faint markings on the platform's surface. It was a mix of symbols and patterns that seemed almost alive, as if the stone itself was humming with energy. She looked up at Trana, her curiosity piqued. "What is the Star Heart?" Trana sighed deeply, her expression heavy with regret. "Long ago, the Zarjan were a great and prosperous people. We lived in harmony with the stars, drawing energy from their light to sustain us. We were explorers, scientists, and creators. Our civilization stretched across the galaxy, and our knowledge of the cosmos was unmatched." Ava could hardly imagine it a race of beings that drew their strength from the stars themselves. But she stayed silent, letting Trana continue. "Our greatest achievement," Trana said, "was the creation of the Star Heart. It was a device that allowed us to harness the energy of distant stars, channeling their power directly into our bodies. It was a source of infinite sustenance, and for centuries, we thrived. We no longer needed to eat or drink. The stars provided everything we required." Ava frowned, glancing at the decayed structure around them. "But what happened?" Trana's eyes darkened. "Hubris. The Star Heart was never meant to be tampered with. But in our greed, we sought to expand its power, to draw from more stars than ever before. We believed we could control the very essence of the cosmos. But we were wrong." She gestured to the temple walls, where faint images were etched into the stone scenes of the Zarjan people standing tall, their hands raised toward the heavens, basking in the light of distant stars. But as Ava looked closer, she noticed a change in the images. The once vibrant figures began to shrink, their skin turning thin and gaunt, their faces etched with pain. "We overloaded the Star Heart," Trana said, her voice barely a whisper. "The connection to the stars was severed, and the device backfired. Instead of giving us life, it began to drain it from us. Our bodies, once sustained by the energy of the cosmos, began to wither. We lost our connection to the stars, and with it, our ability to survive." Ava's eyes widened. "So that's why you're starving." Trana nodded gravely. "We have been trapped in this state for centuries. Bound to this planet, unable to leave. The energy that once sustained us now devours us from within. We have tried to fix the Star Heart, but our knowledge is lost, and our strength has faded." She turned to Ava, her gaze piercing. "Your people, the humans, settled here many years ago, but they never came near us. They feared what we had become, and we did nothing to dispel that fear. We allowed the legends to grow, the stories of the starving Zarjan who would devour any who dared come near. It was easier than admitting the truth." Ava felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't imagine what it must have been like for the Zarjan, watching their bodies waste away, knowing that their only hope of survival was slipping through their fingers. "But why didn't you ask for help?" Ava asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why didn't you reach out to the colony?" My parents are scientists, they could have dash. No one would have helped us, Trana interrupted, her voice harsh. Your kind sees us as a threat, and perhaps, in some ways, we are. We have grown desperate, child. Starvation makes even the noblest among us do terrible things. Ava stood in silence, absorbing everything. The Zarjan were not monsters. They were victims of their own ambition, trapped in a cycle of suffering they couldn't escape. Her heart ached for them, but at the same time, a seed of hope began to sprout in her mind. I think I can help, Ava said, her voice small but determined. Trana tilted her head, her expression one of mild surprise. You are but a child. What could you possibly do? Ava swallowed her nerves and stood a little taller. My parents. They're really smart. They know about machines, energy sources, and maybe I do too. If I could see the star heart, maybe I could figure out what went wrong. I could help you fix it. Trana's expression remained unreadable for a long moment, and the other Zarjan women murmured softly, their voices a mix of skepticism and faint hope. Finally, Trana spoke. You truly believe you can fix what our greatest minds could not? I don't know, Ava admitted. But I want to try. I don't think it's right for you to suffer like this, not if there's something we can do to stop it. The matriarch stared at Ava for a long time, her glowing amber eyes searching the young girl's face. Then, slowly, she nodded. Very well, little human. I will take you to the Star Heart. But know this, it is not a simple machine. It is bound to us, to our very essence. If you fail, the consequences will be dire, for us and for you. Ava felt a surge of both excitement and fear, but she steeled herself. I won't fail, she said, her voice stronger now. I'll do everything I can. With that, Trana motioned to the others, who stepped back to reveal a hidden doorway at the far end of the temple. The air beyond it seemed to hum with a strange energy, and a faint, otherworldly light flickered from within. The Star Heart awaits, Trana said. Let us see if your human ingenuity can succeed where we have failed. Ava took a deep breath, her heart racing as she stepped forward into the unknown, Pip buzzing nervously by her side. Whatever lay ahead, she knew there was no turning back now. Ava's footsteps echoed in the narrow, dimly lit passageway as she followed Trana deeper into the heart of the Zarjan temple. The walls around her seemed to pulse with faint energy, their smooth surfaces etched with the same intricate patterns she had seen outside. The air was heavy with the scent of age and dust, but beneath it was something else, something more ancient and powerful, humming beneath her skin. Pip floated beside her, scanning the surroundings with a nervous flicker of light, his sensors beeping softly in warning. Ava wasn't sure if it was fear or excitement that made her heart race, but she was certain of one thing: she was about to face something far greater than herself. Ahead of her, Trana moved with deliberate grace, her tall form illuminated by the eerie glow of the crystals embedded in the walls. Her fellow Zarjan women followed silently behind, their glowing amber eyes watching Ava with a mix of curiosity and doubt. They had placed their hope, fragile as it was, in this small human girl, and though Ava felt the weight of their expectations, she couldn't shake the sense that she was meant to be here. At last, they reached the end of the passage, and Trana stopped before a massive stone door engraved with swirling star patterns. She raised her hand and placed it against the cold surface. The markings lit up, their glow growing brighter until, with a deep rumble, the door slowly slid open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in soft, pulsating light. Ava stepped inside, her eyes widening in awe. The room was enormous, easily the size of a stadium, with a high ceiling that arched above them like the night sky. In the center of the chamber, hovering a few feet above the ground, was the Star Heart, a massive orb of metal and crystal, suspended by invisible forces. Its surface was a swirling, cracked mosaic of silver and violet light, its core pulsing erratically like a wounded heart. The energy radiating from it was intense, almost overwhelming, as if the Star Heart were alive, breathing and struggling under some unseen weight. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like it. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. The Starheart was clearly a piece of technology far beyond anything humans had ever created, both machine and something more, something almost organic in its design. Trana stepped forward, her voice low and grave. "This is the Starheart, the source of our power and our suffering." Ava took a hesitant step closer, her gaze locked on the glowing orb. The closer she got, the more she could feel the strain emanating from it, like the machine was in pain. Pip's sensors whirred loudly as he analyzed the structure, his reading spiking with each pulse of the Starheart. "It's incredible," Ava whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen anything like it." Trana nodded solemnly. "It was once the heart of our civilization, a conduit for the energy of the stars themselves. But now, as you can see, it is broken. Cracked. The flow of energy is unstable, and instead of nourishing us, it drains us." Ava approached the Starheart cautiously, her mind racing. She could see the fractures running along its surface, faint lines where the energy bled out unevenly. It was as though the machine had been wounded, and the light that once flowed freely now struggled to escape through the cracks. "Can I get closer?" Ava asked, glancing up at Trana. The matriarch gave a slow nod. "But be careful. The Starheart is unpredictable. Many of us have tried to fix it over the centuries, but none have succeeded." Ava steeled herself, gripping the straps of her backpack as she stepped forward. Pip hovered anxiously beside her, his beeping intensifying as they neared the Starheart. "It's okay, Pip," she whispered, more to reassure herself than her robot companion. "We've got this." As she got closer, the air around the Starheart grew warmer, the pulses of energy vibrating through her body. Ava squinted, focusing on the intricate mechanisms and patterns beneath the surface. It was unlike any machine she had ever seen, partly mechanical, partly biological, like a living organism encased in metal. She could see wires and circuits intertwined with glowing veins of energy that pulsed with life. Her mind raced with possibilities, her hands twitching with the urge to fix it. She pulled her backpack off her shoulder and unzipped it, retrieving a small toolkit that her parents had given her. It was basic, meant for small repairs around the colony, but it was all she had. Pip projected a holographic display of the Starheart, mapping its inner workings as best he could. The droid beeped rapidly, his readings fluctuating wildly as he scanned the machine. Ava steadied the projection, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The core is unstable," she muttered to herself. "The energy isn't flowing the way it's supposed to. It's blocked somehow." Trana watched in silence, her gaze steady but filled with a quiet desperation. "We have tried everything we know to restore it," she said softly. "But we have lost so much of our knowledge over the years. We no longer understand how it works." Ava bit her lip, her hands shaking slightly as she reached up and carefully touched the surface of the Starheart. The moment her fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through her, and for a split second, she could feel the machine's pain, the strain of its broken circuits, the chaos of its shattered core. She gasped and pulled her hand back, her heart racing. "It's alive," she whispered. It's trying to fix itself, but it doesn't have the strength." Trana nodded. The Starheart was more than just a machine. It was part of us, part of our essence. When it was whole, it sustained us. Now, it feeds on us. Ava felt a deep sadness well up inside her. The Starheart wasn't just broken, it was suffering, just like the Zarjan. And if it couldn't be fixed, they would all die. "I'm going to try," Ava said firmly, her resolve hardening. "But I'll need some parts. And I'll need time." Trana gestured to the walls of the chamber, where ancient tools and materials were stored in forgotten alcoves. "Take whatever you need," she said. "But be cautious. The Starheart is volatile. If the energy becomes too unstable, it could destroy us all." Ava nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. She pulled out her toolkit and got to work, dismantling broken components and replacing them with whatever she could find. Pip buzzed beside her, scanning and assisting where he could, his small arms handing her tools as she worked. The hours slipped by in a blur of concentration. Ava lost herself in the task, her hands moving with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She rerouted power lines, stabilized circuits, and carefully sealed the cracks in the Starheart's core, using alien materials she didn't fully understand but trusted instinctively. As she worked, she could feel the Starheart responding, its pulses growing steadier, its light brighter. The chaotic energy that had once threatened to overwhelm the chamber began to calm, and Ava dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was getting somewhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she tightened the last bolt and stepped back, wiping sweat from her brow. The Starheart thrummed softly, its light now a steady, rhythmic pulse. It's done," she whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. The chamber was silent, save for the gentle hum of the Starheart. Trana and the other Zarjan watched in stunned silence, their amber eyes wide with disbelief. Ava held her breath, waiting for anything to happen. Then, slowly, the light from the Starheart began to intensify, spreading outward in a brilliant wave of energy that filled the room with warmth. Ava shielded her eyes, watching as the Zarjan women, who had once looked frail and ghost-like, began to stand taller, their translucent skin glowing with vibrant energy. Their once gaunt forms filled out, their eyes shining brighter than ever before. Trana stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the Starheart. You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "You have restored it." Ava's heart soared with relief and pride, but before she could respond, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them. The Starheart flared violently, and a crackling sound filled the air as the machine surged with energy, brighter than ever before. Ava's eyes widened in alarm. "Something's wrong." Trana's expression darkened, her voice urgent. "The energy is too unstable. If we don't contain it, dash." Before she could finish, the Starheart erupted with light, and Ava felt herself being pulled into the heart of the storm. AI spurs. Ava's world erupted into a blinding storm of light and energy. The pulsing glow of the Starheart flared brighter than the sun, and the ground beneath her feet buckled as the chamber shook violently. She felt herself being pulled toward the Starheart, the force of the energy dragging her closer like a powerful current. Pip beeped frantically, hovering around her, trying to stabilize her with his small arms, but it was no use, the energy was too strong. Ava's heart raced as she stumbled, barely managing to stay on her feet as the Starheart throbbed dangerously, its light erratic and unstable. "Pip!" Ava screamed, trying to stay focused despite the chaos. "We have to stabilize it. Now!" Pip, ever the loyal companion, projected a holographic display of the Starheart's internal structure once again, but this time, the readings were wild, chaotic, spiking in dangerous ways Ava had never seen before. The core was overloading. The repairs had worked too well. The Starheart was restoring itself too quickly, pulling in too much energy at once. If it couldn't be contained, the entire chamber, no, the entire planet would be torn apart. Trana, now glowing with the same vibrant energy that filled the room, stepped forward, her eyes filled with urgency. "What is happening?" she demanded, her voice booming over the roar of the Starheart. "Why is it destabilizing?" Ava gritted her teeth, her mind racing. "It's drawing in too much power from the stars. It's been starved for so long, it's like it's overeating." She ducked as a stray bolt of energy crackled past her, singeing the air. "If we don't regulate the flow, it's going to explode." Trana's eyes widened in realization. "We must stop it. The energy, if it is not controlled, I know." Ava shouted, cutting her off. "I know. But I don't know how to stop it." Panic clawed at her chest. She had worked so hard, come so far, and now everything was about to be destroyed: herself, the Zarjan, the colony, because she couldn't control the very thing she had fixed. Suddenly, a thought struck her. The Starheart wasn't just a machine, it was part of the Zarjan, connected to their very essence. If the Zarjan had once controlled it, maybe they could again. Trana! Ava shouted over the roar. The Starheart is tied to you, right? To your people? The matriarch nodded, her face grim. Yes, it was made from our energy, from our essence. Then maybe you can control it. Ava said, hope flaring in her chest. You and the others, you are connected to it. You need to use that connection to stop the overload. Trana hesitated, her glowing eyes filled with uncertainty. The other Zarjan exchanged nervous glances, their confidence in their abilities long diminished after centuries of suffering. We no longer have the power we once did, Trana said, her voice wavering for the first time. We have been weakened for so long, I fear we do not have the strength. Ava grabbed her arm, her small hand trembling but determined. You're stronger than you think. I can't do this alone. But together maybe we can control it. Trana stared at her, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But then, slowly, she nodded. She turned to the other Zarjan, her voice carrying the weight of their last hope. Sisters, we must act now, or all will be lost. One by one, the Zarjan women stepped forward, forming a circle around the Starheart. Their glowing eyes locked onto the pulsing orb of energy, their gaunt faces set with determination. Trana closed her eyes and raised her hands, her long, graceful fingers stretching toward the Starheart. The other Zarjan followed suit, their hands trembling as they channeled what little energy they had left into the machine that had once sustained them. Ava watched in awe as the Zarjan began to glow brighter, their energy merging with the Starheart's wild, chaotic pulses. The ground beneath her feet rumbled as the air hummed with power, but slowly, ever so slowly, the erratic pulses of the Starheart began to stabilize. Pip beeped excitedly, his sensors showing that the energy levels were starting to even out. Ava felt a surge of hope, but she knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Starheart was still dangerously unstable. She grabbed her toolkit and sprinted toward the Starheart, ignoring the searing heat that radiated from its surface. The Zarjan were doing their part now, it was up to her to finish what she had started. Pip, reroute the core stabilization circuits to the energy regulators. Ava ordered, her voice shaking with urgency. Pip whirred into action, projecting a map of the Starheart's internal systems. Ava worked furiously, her hands flying as she rerouted power lines, sealed cracks, and reinforced the circuits that had been damaged by centuries of neglect. The Starheart pulsed around her, its energy vibrating through her body, but she kept her focus, determined to save the Zarjan and herself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ava connected the final wire. There was a moment of stillness, a single heartbeat where the Starheart's light dimmed. And then, with a soft, steady hum, the energy inside the Starheart stabilized. The wild pulses calmed into a steady rhythm, and the violent tremors shaking the ground ceased. The blinding light faded to a soft, radiant glow that filled the chamber with warmth. Ava collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, her hands trembling from exhaustion. Pip hovered anxiously beside her, beeping softly in concern. It's okay, Pip, she whispered, barely able to speak. We did it. Trana stepped forward, her eyes glowing softly with gratitude. The other Zarjan looked at each other in disbelief, their gaunt faces now filled with a renewed strength and vitality. Their translucent skin glowed with vibrant energy, their forms no longer frail and ghost-like. The centuries of suffering were melting away before Ava's eyes. You have saved us, little human, Trana said, her voice filled with awe and reverence. You have done what we thought was impossible. Ava sat up slowly, her body aching from the strain. It wasn't just me, she said, her voice hoarse. You saved yourselves. I just helped. Trana knelt beside her, her amber eyes warm and filled with admiration. You have given us back our future, she said softly. For centuries, we believed we were doomed, that no one would ever come to our aid. And yet, here you are, a child, braver and wiser than any who came before you. Ava smiled weakly, but pride filled her chest. I just wanted to help. Tren arose, her tall form now radiating strength and grace once more. You have done more than help. You have restored the Zarjan. From this day forward, we will no longer be the tribe of starving, forgotten women. We will rebuild. We will thrive. The other Zarjan women nodded, their faces bright with renewed hope. For the first time in centuries, they stood tall, no longer prisoners of their own hunger. As Ava looked around the chamber, the weight of what she had accomplished began to sink in. She had faced her fears, solved a problem no one else could, and in doing so, had saved an entire race from extinction. I think it's time for me to go home, Ava said quietly, her body aching for rest. Trina smiled, a rare and genuine warmth in her expression. You will always be welcome here, Ava of the humans. You are no longer just a visitor. You are a friend of the Zarjan. Ava nodded, her heart swelling with pride. Thank you, she said softly. But next time, maybe don't scare people with those legends. You're not monsters. Trina laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. Perhaps you are right, little one. Perhaps it is time for new stories to be told. With a final wave, Ava and Pip made their way back toward the exit of the temple. As they stepped out into the cool, alien air, the energy field of the Forbidden Zone shimmered briefly before dissolving, the boundary between the Zarjan and the rest of the colony now erased. Ava looked back one last time at the ancient temple, now glowing softly with life, and smiled. No one had dared to come near the tribe of starving alien women, no one, except for a little human girl who saw past the fear and found the truth. And in doing so, she had changed everything.